The film is called The Violin Maker, and it's about Martin McClean, who comes from Moneymore, where he has a small studio in the rolling countryside, and he makes violins there.
Regarding the finished film, I hope it portrays accurately and interestingly the work of a violin maker. There aren't too many of those guys around. It's a craft that's been going on for hundreds of years, and hopefully with the techniques and indeed the facilities that we actually used, it will give a new angle and indeed a new perspective, visual and oral, about what goes into the craft.
Since the introduction of the violin from Europe in the 18th century, there have only been a handful of violin makers throughout Ireland, north or south. Today this craft is still carried out by a few dedicated craftsmen, one of whom is Martin McClean from Moneymore. His skills reflect and complement the rich history of traditional violin making in Ireland over the past couple of centuries. So Martin, what part of the violin is this that you're working on now?
This is the top of the instrument. This is the part which actually vibrates. Well, this came from Switzerland, this piece, but this wood it's very light, it's very resonant, and it has quite an important effect, you know, on the sound of the instrument. You know, we take those two pieces and join them, and that becomes a wood for the front of the instrument.
How do you get the finished dimensions, Martin?
Well, there are a few different ways of doing it. Generally, I would measure the height, and at its highest point, this at the minute should be about 17.5 millimeters. There's 17 there, but this will finish up about 15.5. And
so right down the midrib is the thickest bit.
Yeah, this point here would be the highest point, and it would fade. It would fall away gradually. So we'll carve this so that there's no sudden rises or no sudden falls, and everything rises gradually up to the highest point. The spruce, I suppose that probably contributes most towards the sound. It's a lot lighter, and as you say, it's a soft wood, although there's also quite a lot of strength built into it, just through molecular structure and so on.
Which can't be seen with the naked eye.
No, it can't be seen. There's a lot more to it than meets the eye.
I'm a botanist and a dendrochronologist, and in this laboratory we cut thin sections of wood so that we can look at the detailed structure and use this to interpret the woodworking properties and the properties that it might be for making musical instruments. Under the microscope I have a section of maple wood, and we can look at the different patterns in the wood, and from this we can determine what sort of wood it is and also find out about its properties, how it might be used. The maple wood is a deciduous tree. It has a complicated structure. If we change now to this second slide, which is of a spruce, the spruce is a much more primitive wood. It's a conifer, and it has a much simpler structure. If we look at the cross-section, we can see the individual annual rings, and these annual rings vary in width, because in a good year the tree will make a wide ring, and in a bad year it'll make a narrow ring. And the dendrochronologist could take old pieces of wood, say from the time when Stradivarius was making violins, and interpret what the climate might have been at this time.
People are still trying to, I suppose, replicate the varnish that Stradivari used. Some people think that's the secret of his success, and the success of a lot of the old Italian makers. There's a lot of controversy surrounding varnish. You know, basically there are two types of varnish for violins. There's a spurred varnish and an oil varnish. And an oil varnish is very slow drying, so it's quite awkward to use, and you have to build it up. You have to build up the colour and the thickness gradually. But it's by far the best. It's hard wearing and it's flexible. You know, it's soft and yet it's tough, and it's got a lot of qualities. And that's what I use. I mean, you can go out today and you can buy a nice varnish, you know, from specialist makers, or you can make your own, and it's going to be fairly similar to what.
Like buying a good malt, then you get a good mature varnish.
Yeah, it does take a certain amount of time to settle and for all the ingredients to blend together.
Mm-hmm. I think it doesn't taste the same.
No, unfortunately not. You know, it's also more expensive. You know.
What's more expensive than malt?
It is indeed, yeah.
I'd buy the malt. You play the violin yourself. Is there ever a time where you've said, I'm not going to sell that one, I'm going to keep that for myself?
I'd rather see someone else. I'd rather see a better player having a go on it, you know.